bloom in spring. Tell me who gives the air that you breathe. Ooh. Everything that you need he will provide, so you may as well come on and give him a try. 'Cause he's awesome. Ooh, he's awesome. He's awesome. What would I do without him? Couldn't make a move without him. I don't wanna be without him. He's awesome.
Greetings, people of God. Welcome to ZMR Ministries. I'm Pastor Z, and thank you for joining me for another episode of What's the Issue Wednesday. Now, today's topic, we're talking about PILL, P-I-L-L, or prayer. Now, you're probably wondering, Pastor Z, what are you talking about? Now, we understand in the Black community especially, when it comes to mental health, we really don't want to deal with it. We always want to just pray it away. But sometimes there are real mental issues that are undealt with and undiagnosed. And so we're going to be talking about today whether you should just pray it away, or do you have a diagnosis that you need some pills to go on and help you out with your little process. Now, today's panel, you guys, I am so excited. And I know that I say that every week, but I mean that because I have my friends here who are also educated women. They're clinicians, and they all have masters in counseling, and they gonna help y'all figure this thing out. Even me, because I may have a little twitch somewhere. Please help me welcome my special guest. I have Lakeisha Castleberry, we have Mia Johnson, and we have Patricia Patoba. How y'all doing, ladies?
Good.
Thank y'all. So, I just feel like I'm in therapy right now. Like I'm gonna walk out with diagnosis, y'all, prescription or something. So I want to talk about mental illness first and foremost. I want to talk about why it's so uncommon, not just in the Black community, but especially when it comes to the Black church. Why is it that we don't want to deal with or accept that mental illness is real? Mia looks at Patricia like.
Okay. I think a lot of it really stems from the lack of education.
Right.
I think just in the church, we don't really talk about that. A lot of the times I'm seeing it more now, but back in the days it's taboo. There was a stigma associated when you are seeking help for your mental health. It's viewed as lacking faith.
Right.
You are betraying God, or we look at it as you are trusting somebody else instead of really having your faith in God to help you with this. So I think just a combination of all of that has made it where people are frowned upon when they are talking about their mental health. We'll just tell you, hey, go pray about it.
And what's interesting is I've actually heard this before when someone was talking about seeking outside help outside of the church, and someone responded with, "You don't have faith?" I was like, what faith got to do with them being crazy? I was gonna say something else, but it's that is so true. Like I'm gonna get into that, y'all. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Well, I think there are two things. In addition to what Patricia said, we have to look at what systemically, culturally, historically, what we were taught, what we understand. Therapy was not something we always could necessarily afford.
That's so true. Yeah.
So all you could afford to do was pray about it.
That's good.
You didn't have the ability to go book a session with a therapist to talk it out. You had your pastor and you had the altar. That's all you really could afford at that time. And so then you have, on the other hand, the labels. No one wants to be labeled. Like I know you jokingly said crazy, but nobody wants to be called crazy in mental health. If they have a little imbalance or anything like that, no one wants to feel like they're going to be labeled as the crazy one, the crazy friend, the crazy family member. So between the lack of faith, and like they have a lack of faith and betraying God, but there's also, we ain't never had no money before. We got through it just fine. Our ancestors, they came through slavery. They were beaten. They can go through all this. Surely we can just pray about it and get through it. So there's a sense of guilt that we can't maneuver through regular life without needing a therapist, but our ancestors could do all of this and didn't have a pill. It's those types of things too, and then not wanting to be labeled.
Yeah, the fear of being stigmatized. Yeah.
For me, I grew up with, you don't tell people your business. You
Yeah.
keep it in the house, right? If we have an issue, if someone is going through something, we talk about it amongst family.
Right.
You didn't allow it to leave the house. So that's for one. You just didn't tell anybody. You dealt with it. And for two, I think people just didn't believe that there was a such thing as mental health. They was like, oh, he's acting. Oh, she's just showing out.
Yes.
You know, she just need a whooping. You know, and that's not the case all the time. And so I think a lot of times we were in denial about mental health. You know, they just need to go sit down. They're going through something. They brought this upon themselves. They're being, you know, punished. You know, that kind of thing. So I think now people are starting to realize I didn't do anything wrong. This is something that I'm going through, and it's real. And I need to talk about it because sometimes family and friends cannot help you.
That's true.
You know, they don't have the tools, they don't have the strategy to help you, and it's not okay to just keep it inside.
Right. So clearly we're all on one accord when it comes to mental illness being taboo.
Right.
Right? Not just in the black church, but just in black culture, period. Now, Keisha, you said something, you know, just pray it away, whoop it away, you know, beat it away, go sit down and shut up away. Whatever it is, we always want to do something else in place of what needs to be done. So do you guys, I know Patricia kind of touched on this about lack of awareness. Do you believe that if we are more aware that we will respond differently? Me personally, I don't.
I'm gonna agree with you. I think that we are the most aware now than we have ever been when it comes to mental health. There are movies depicting it. There are all types of educational seminars. We even have celebrities such as Taraji P. Henson, who has a whole initiative on mental health. It is out there. The information is there, and this is the digital age. So it's no longer a situation where we're like ignorant to certain things because we just flat out don't know. We live in a digital age where everything is literally at our fingertips. And so I think that even when we have the awareness, it doesn't necessarily change things until you want to change things.
That's so true.
And so, you know, you can have a family riddled with mental illness, riddled with mental health, and they will come up with different things, you know, whether it's saying things like, oh, that's just how I am. You know,
that runs in the family.
That runs in the family. You know, Uncle so-and-so is like this, Grandma so-and-so is like this. I think the only one that's probably accepted is baby blues. You know, it's okay to have baby blues. Postpartum.
Right.
Old people call it baby blues.
Right.
But postpartum now, the clinical term, everyone is accepting, and it's almost a badge of honor now to have a baby and say, I'm going through postpartum depression. You know, but if you just say I'm clinically depressed, then it's like
you're crazy.
Right. Everybody depressed, you know. Of course, you know you're gonna get that because, of course, we don't look at individual situations. We just look at, well, I went through that, I'm over it.
Right.
You know, so we tend to want. Right. That's it. We minimize the actual issue and that we all deal with things differently.
Right.
And, you know, some people do have a chemical imbalance.
Absolutely.
That adds to the behavior, that adds to why they're so depressed for it is longer than anybody else. So I think it's a lot of other factors. Keisha, did you respond? Or what did you say? Oh, okay, go ahead. Y'all know I'm a talker, so I'm forgetting.
No, I agree with Mia. She said everything like it's perfect.
And when you think of the chemical imbalances, you also think about certain things that create and cause chemical imbalances. Because some people grew up and they didn't necessarily have that chemical imbalance, but then there are some medications. You all have seen the commercials. You know, you take a particular medication and then it's like side effects. It's suicidal thoughts, depression. You know, you start going down the list and it's like, okay, all if I take this one pill. So you have medications that can create an imbalance. And then you have people who went through, you know, other things like drug addiction. So that's the difficult thing about diagnosing someone when they've gone through a drug addiction is because it's almost like that question of what came first, the chicken or the egg. You don't really know if they were using drugs to self-medicate or if now the drugs has created a chemical imbalance. So now we don't really know. So that's why they call it dual diagnosis.
Right, that's good.
And also trauma can change as well.
Yeah.
Severe trauma, you can be in an accident or just grief. Can cause cause
you slip into a depression.
Grief. Like there are so many things now that can cause you to be depressed or chemical imbalance.
I remember a couple of years ago I was reading about this article about these different factories, and they were letting out different gases, you know, not purposely or intently, but what they discovered was there was a great percentage of mental illness in that area where that particular gas or whatever it was that was extracted from the warehouse or the factory rather was affecting people's mental psyche. And I was just like, you know, so pretty much everybody crazy because of your factory in that area. You know, where do you draw the line and say, okay, you need to shut down, or is something, you know, pre-existing? One of my good friends, she has an illness and she takes medication, and like Mia said, you know, of course those side effects are going down, just decline, suicidal thoughts, rage, you know, hallucinations, and she has experienced all of those. And so she was like, you know, where do you draw the line between I need my medication because of my illness, but I don't want to sit around angry at everyone or hallucinating or balling up in the corner, you know, and I think that plays a big factor of why people don't want to accept that they have a mental illness because they don't want to be labeled, like Mia said, crazy.
You know, I think with that, you know, that's always an issue, you know, with people just being reluctant when it comes to medication. And, you know, I think it's important to have a doctor that you really feel comfortable with, that you feel that this doctor is really has your best interest in mind. You know, there are some psychiatrists that are just pill happy. They will just bombard you with medication. They don't really take the time to listen to you and really try to assess what the issue is. And if you find yourself that you have a doctor like that who just every time you talk to them about the side effect that you're experiencing and they just increase the dose or add another medication, then you might need to consider a second opinion and, you know, finding another doctor. So that's another factor. But there are cases, I'm a believer in holistic mental health. You know, let's try the therapy, let's try the natural route, but there are some instances in order for you to get to that therapeutic place, like the therapeutic level, you need a combination of medication and therapy. So when it's that, you know, situation, you know, we should all collaborate, your therapist and your psychiatrist, to try to find the right dosage, you know, the cocktail that works for you.
Yes, cocktail. That's a pretty way of putting it. You know, medication, you're taking your cocktail.
But I also say that it's important to two things actually. Advocating for yourself, because what I heard you say is make sure you're advocating for yourself. If you don't have the right doctor, because you know there are racial disparities in the health industry, and so if you have a doctor that's not listening to you, that you know you're not feeling like they're connecting with you or hearing anything that you're saying, or they're continuing to bombard you with more medication, then it's time to move around, because we do have a racial disparity when it comes to how we're treated with our health. But the other thing about that is I want people to understand that if you are receiving medication, then you should be receiving medication and taking therapy at the same time. Because what ends up happening is people get prescribed medication, and now it's just medication management, and you're really not addressing the behaviors or the issues that cause you to be in that situation. And it's just you're popping a pill to get up, a pill to go to bed, a pill to not have anxiety, and instead of learning coping skills. A lot of the times people grow up and they really didn't learn coping skills. When we look at kids really teach us what we either forgot or didn't get as kids. And so when I used to do adolescent therapy, I loved dealing with kids. I loved doing their counseling. And so when I would ask them questions like, when they would talk about their friends and they're fighting, I'm like, well, how do you know that's your friend? Well, because we play together, we eat together, and we don't let anybody talk about each other. Like they have this basic concept of life, basic concept of friendship. And I'm like, you look at some adults, and adults don't have the basic concept of people talk about your friends, stick together, play together, don't fight, share. Adults don't even have that concept, but kids have that basic concept, and something happens, trauma happens over life, and then they forget the basic concepts that they learned.
That's
And then
good.
now here you are, you're traumatic, you have this trauma, and then you meet somebody else with trauma, and now you're trauma bonding.
Right.
So now we're friends based on our bond through trauma.
That's good. That's good. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you guys. I'm sorry. But Mia cracks me up, y'all, because that's what she was saying is so true. We don't have the basics. And it's like you're saying it, you're putting it in such simple terms, and it makes sense because you're just like, y'all don't know that?
Right.
You know what I mean? But what I love about all of you ladies is not only do you have the education, but you also are in ministry. And so I remember my personal journey in counseling, you know, when I went through anger management, I tell people all the time I got the best of both worlds. A, because they were licensed ministers, you know, actively working in the church, but they were also licensed counselors, right? And so they had the spiritual and the practical. And so the reason why I wanted to have this education, it is education, but this conversation about pill or prayer is because we know it's taboo in the church, right? It's a question of our faith, it's a question of our trust, it's a question, you know, of our belief system, you know, why you just can't depend on God and things of that nature. And I think it's so important for us to talk about this because we do understand that spiritual warfare is real.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we all got that, and we're on the same plane. However, you know, how do we deal with I guess not permitting deviant behavior? Because I think sometimes, like Keisha was saying earlier, we do permit it. It's just whoop them. Oh, girl, you let your son act like that,
Right.
or you need to stop. Oh, she just crazy.
Right.
You know, how do you guys deal with that? Because we understand that there are different responses, right? I'm looking at my notes, but stuff is churning in my head. What is the appropriate response? Is what I'm trying to get to. Forget the notes.
For appeal or prayer.
For appeal or prayer, because, you know, how do you guys decipher, you know, what needs to be prayed away and what needs to be peeled away? Because I know when you're dealing with your clients, I've had conversations, especially with these two, where they're sitting there and they're like, you know, they don't need no diagnosis. I need to heat come on higher, you know. That's the enemy. And it's comical, but it's like, you know, of course there are other people who are practicing who don't have the religious part of it, the faith part of it. They don't understand spiritual warfare. So how do you guys decipher the two in you know, the work field? Because that's hard to draw a line, especially when you got to be professional.
Right. I mean, I know for me, one thing, of course, we laugh and we joke about it a lot, right? Because we've seen a whole lot, you know, in ministry and things of that nature. But I know for me, one of the things I always say is you can absolutely get delivered and have a breakthrough service and everything where the bondages and the chains are broken in that moment. But, because that's the spiritual part.
Right.
Now you have to walk out the natural.
Right.
If you have had a life of trauma, if you had a life of certain behavioral patterns, you know, I always say, I believe, you know, I accept your apology, right? I just believe your pattern too.
Right.
So if your behavioral pattern is a certain type of way, and you go to a service and God does something and miraculous and it's broken off of your life, and that is great. We want to praise God for it, but you're gonna need some reinforcement. And after that, you're gonna have to know how to restructure your life, what to do. You're gonna need practical strategy, wisdom, things of that nature. So for example, I'll just make up a scenario. You have a man-woman, or man-man, or woman-woman. These days, you don't know what type of couple it is. Come to church, and they have been living a life that is outside of what we say is the will of God according to the standards. So they are not married. It's not man-woman married, what have you. And they come to church, and the word convicts them. The word does what it's supposed to do, which is convict. Okay, word convicts them. They come to the altar. They are prayed for, and it is evident that God has delivered them that day. When they leave, if they don't leave what they planned for some type of counseling for trauma, some type of strategy for what they're going to do when they leave, they're going to leave and walk back into the thing they were delivered from. And then now they're going to have even more bondages to come out of. So you come there, you get delivered. Now you got to look at your whoever significant other and say, we can't do this no more. So we may be in a lease, we may have a lease agreement, we may have property, we may have bank accounts, we may have all kinds of things because you set up a life of sin. So now you've got to deconstruct this life of sin and recreate by the renewing of your mind, right? A new life. And so what you'll end up doing is saying, okay, well, I'm going to stay at my mama's house. We got 6 more months on this lease. I'm going to stay at my mama's house and you stay at your mama's house. We'll start, dividing up the accounts, things that you need to be able to go sit somewhere neutral, and talk that through after you've been delivered.
I mean, definitely the spiritual has its part, but just like Mia said, after you get that deliverance, after you get that word, you still have to get out there in the real world, and change just won't happen overnight because you have habits and patterns of behavior that have been established for years. So you have to get the tools in order to reframe those thought patterns and unlearn, then learn and relearn certain things. So all of that takes time, planning, strategies, and sometimes that's when you need the help of a therapist to help you and teach you those new tools and skills that you need, So pill or prayer. I always pray as a therapist because I am a believer. So I always pray before my sessions. I pray after my sessions, and I'll ask the Holy Spirit. But there are some cases where I will, totally tell them, I'm praying for you. Sometimes if they are believers, I'll tell them, we're doing this therapy, but I really believe for you to fully benefit from these sessions, you need to see a psychiatrist, get on some medications. Let's get you to a stable place so that you can really get to a place where you can apply all these things that you're learning.
That's good.
Do you find that because think about when the word said that, he's a wonderful counselor. And so even as counselors, one of the things that helped me in my journey in being a counselor is understanding that when people come talk to you, they are seeking the advice and the wisdom of God, not you. And so do you find that you pray before so that you literally have insight into their lives so that when they even come in, sometimes you're saying things, they don't realize what's happening, right? They don't realize it's a gift, they don't realize anything like that, but you're able to both minister and counsel at the same time. And it's really effective. So is it pill or prayer? How about both?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's a combination, and I agree. Sometimes I have those days where you have a session, you're like, it wasn't nothing I said. That was totally a download from the Holy Spirit. It's a download from the Holy Spirit, and they'll tell you it was that one thing that you said, and that was it for me. I was like, oh, I say that? I don't remember. But I think your personal relationship with God and my time of meditation and my devotional that I do prior to going in and seeing my clients, all that come into play during the session.
Keisha, what do you think is the appropriate response to deviant behavior?
I think you can do both. And I saw it when I was doing my internship at a mental hospital. And sometimes in order for us to even be able to counsel, the patient have to be sometimes sedated because they're so wired up on different things, right? And so in order for us, that's like tilling the ground. In order for the seed to get in, you have to till it. So sometimes you need medication just to calm you down so that you can receive what I'm trying to get to you. Because I can counsel, I can pray, but if you're not ready to receive it, it might not take. And so, and at first I was like, a little hesitant about medication. But once I started to see that there are certain people that need it. Mentally, their brain is not, there's a disconnect in the signals from their brain and what the brain is telling their bodies to do, and they need that help. It doesn't mean anything negative, it's just sometimes you need a little extra help before you can receive the therapy. And so I pray, especially being in an environment where we know there are spirits that are seeking, to get on any open vessel. So for one, I pray for myself to cover myself so that I don't receive or have anything that comes on me, and two, to pray for the patient, because I've been in contact with people that have really strong spirits or things, and I could literally feel it. And I'm talking to the patient, and I'm holding her hand, and I'm like, oh, Jesus. Within myself, I'm saying Jesus, but I'm still, talking to him and I'm listening. But within myself, I'm thinking, God, thank you for covering me.
Guarding
This
your
is
portals.
real.
Yeah.
Yes, this is real. But I think both. I don't think it's anything wrong with taking some medication now. If it gets to where you're totally dependent upon that, that's where we need to really think about it. But I think they go hand in hand sometimes.
And you know what? I was sitting here the entire time while all y'all were talking because I was like, at what point do you kind of put a yellow light on it because it's becoming an addiction? You know what I mean? Where like Keisha said, a second ago, where you're using, pills for everything, or it was Mia, one of you guys said it. But yeah, you're using a pill for everything and it's becoming your sole resource.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Identity outside of that.
Right.
I would say, well, first there are certain classifications of medication that make it prone to addiction. And so because, for example, benzodiazepines, those are your Xanaxes and, and things of that nature. Those types of medications, they have a tendency to get people addicted. And if you already have an addictive personality, or somebody who's on drugs and things of that nature, your psychiatrist needs to know that so that they're aware of what to prescribe you, what not to prescribe you, things of that nature. But those drugs alone, the chemicals in the pill has the ability to have you addicted. So that's one thing. On the other hand, we're talking about behaviors. So you have people who have certain behaviors, whether it's borderline personality disorder, or narcissism, or whatever the case may be. Most of the time, they are definitely a personality disorders. But you have people with those types of disorders who they feed on the attention.
Right.
So I can't stop taking this medication because if I stop taking this medication, I will no longer be this person. And this person, I don't know this person healed.
That's so good.
I don't know this person healed.
That's
I had a friend of mine who, she would joke. And she would joke about being, diagnosed with everything under the sun and taking all these pills. She would joke about it. And I remember joking back with her saying, okay, girl, as long as you don't miss no dose. Because first time you pop off on me, we're going to have a pop. That's not the God truth. I told her that. But, I told her later on, because this went on for years. And I looked at her, I said, who would you be healed? You're used to getting your disability. You're used to getting your identity through your mental health.
That's so good.
Who would you be healed? And are you able to see yourself in the future as a healed person? Are you able to walk away from this life? Because being able to see yourself healed means walking away from being disabled. Whenever you collect your disability check, you are co-signing that you are permanently disabled. So if you see yourself as healed and you see yourself as mentally stable, are you able to say, I'm mentally stable enough to work, be a family, do whatever God wants me to do outside of this label?
That's good. That's the side of the coin.
I mean,
you have certain people that want it because of the benefits of it. And then you have some. And so when he was talking, it made me think about the word drugs itself. Because I just remember my grandmother saying, you don't need that drug. Because they lump drug out. If it's not for your physical, like high blood pressure, or, you have a physical situation, but anything that's mental, my heart hurt, I'm depressed, now you're trying to take some drugs. And they don't know the difference, right? And I think that right there, too, is in a lot of Black communities. To distinguish between there are different types of drugs. It's just not, they thinking cocaine, heroin, and all the same. You just get a prescription, but to them it's all the same. I don't want that drug because I don't want to be addicted. But no, you might need just a little dosage. You don't have to get the high dose, just a little bit, because you're not sleeping, you're not eating. Like you're not gonna last. You're about to crash if we don't get you something.
Get you stable.
And there's goals. You have to have goals. Short-term goals, long-term goals. We don't want you to be on this long-term. But for right now, we just want to get you stable enough so that you can receive the tools and the strategies that we're trying to get to you.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big thing.
But how do you know when the cutoff is there?
Usually, when it comes to strong medicine, like for example, someone who's bipolar, who is taking lithium, there's usually your psychiatrist is doing med management. They're supposed to come, you come in every month or every 3 weeks They do sometimes some blood work to see if you are at a therapeutic level.
Right.
So, usually if there are certain symptoms that they'll start recognizing when this is becoming, it's no longer therapeutic or, you're having some, the behaviors and, things like that are just dysfunctional. Usually those are the red signs that, okay, you've reached your limits there.
Right. And I think that's a good point, because one of the things I've learned about, just since you mentioned bipolar, one of the things I've learned is if a person takes themselves off of the medication, it's usually that typical bipolar behavior of
I don't think that.
Because it's very difficult when you work in a clinic and you work in the doctor's office. It's very hard to keep a person who's diagnosed with bipolar on their medication, because once you have it in their system a good 2 months, 3 months, then they're like, I don't need it and I want to stop. And it's because most people don't understand that the dichotomy of living a bipolar life. I mean, you're up and down, you're living on two poles, and what is considered normal baseline for everybody else is not considered normal baseline for them. And so what ends up happening is, if they are someone who cycles regularly in their moods, if they're up here all the time, or if they're down here all the time and everybody else is right here, they're used to doing this, and this is normal. We're right here and this is normal like this, but this is what they're doing, right? And so if you give them a medication and level them out right here, they feel like a zombie.
And you said something that really kind of struck me just now, the word normal. And I think that is honestly, that's the basis of the problem. When you really think about pillow prayer and what we're discussing, it's about normalcy. And when we think about it, mental illness is not considered normal for us. What we consider a baseline for normal behavior can be, completely abnormal to somebody else. I mean, not just in our culture, but even within families, within friendships, within churches, within ministries, whatever it is. Everybody's idea of normal is different. So it's almost like, how do you find a middle ground to determine what's normal and appropriate when it comes?
I like the word she used, baseline, better. I don't like the word normal. Normal. I had so many meanings. I'm normal, and everybody else normal. Then what am I? So I think baseline makes more sense, because when we say baseline, this is your normal level. Your normal. Your normal level of functioning. So I think that's more appropriate to use that, because all of us are different, And so
And then with the baseline, you have to also remember is, when we look at a baseline, we also are looking at what symptoms are even required to be diagnosed. So if there are 10 symptoms here, and you don't have to check off these 10 symptoms, then you are at a baseline. Whether it's this society, whether it's the society in the UK or Africa or whatever, this is what the baseline is in our society. Now, when you start checking off this, and this, and your behavior is doing like this, and everybody else is going just like this, baseline, hello, and you're doing like this right here, then that's a problem. That's a problem. And so what ends up, the old school way of medicating bipolar was you had an antidepressant and a mood stabilizer, and both would do like this. And then you would be on baseline with everybody else. Now they have one pill that does it all, and it's usually time released or whatever the case may be. I was educated and trained during the old school way, where it was like 2 pills, you go right here. But if whatever the mental health or the mental illness is, there's a baseline. So Keisha mentioned earlier grief. People can get on that grief and stay there.
That's true.
And for years,
that's true,
and years, their excuse for things is, I'm still grieving. I'm still grieving the loss of this person. I'm still grieving the loss of this person. Person died 2 years ago. Person died 5 years ago. And I can't remember if it's clinically after 9 months. I cannot recall off the top of my head. But after a period of about 9 months, it's not grief anymore.
What is it?
It's depression. It's no longer grief. And so as a culture, we like to say, I've never been the same since mama died. I've never been the same since daddy died. And he's been gone 15 years. And every time this time of year comes, I say, I got to stay in the bed. That's not grief anymore in your heart. That's depression.
Yeah.
That's clinical depression. And there are different types of depression, whether it's reoccurrent, that's a reoccurrent. It's something that recurs over and over. Or a single episode, you know, but you have to know that we hide behind grief and let grief be our term that we use for depression.
But you know what? That's why awareness is so important. Because I was sitting here listening and I was thinking about when my brother was murdered. You know, for a long time, I just thought I was grieving. And it wasn't until, you know, you look back in retrospect and you're like, no, I was like, I was depressed. Like, even to the point, I mean, I'll share this with y'all, to the point where I was suicidal. I was popping pills, you know, to make me sleep. And, you know, I was staying with a friend of mine at the time. She was hiding my pills and I had a psychotic breakdown, like, where are my pills? And she was just calm. She was like, no, you need, it was Simone of all people. She was just like, you need to come, you cannot have these pills. And I literally thought I needed it. But it wasn't until later that I realized, okay, yes, I'm still hurting and grieving, but I am really depressed. And so that struck me.
You know, it's a fine line, because, you know, we know the stages of grief. And the stages of grief are, you know, the denial, the anger, the bargaining, and then the depression, and then you get to acceptance. So depression is a normal phase of grief if you are within that 9 to 12 months normal grief period. But after that,
I thought something was wrong.
There's still wrong.
Something is still wrong. You know, just not in that.
So, you know, if you are feeling depressed, you know, the sadness, low motivation, I don't really feel like doing anything, what's the purpose of life, all of those thoughts. Within that time period, you get a pass, right? You're like, okay, she's grieving. After that, when it becomes to where you can't function, you have to use a pill, you get upset when somebody takes your pill, we need to, you know, professional help.
You know, I'm laughing on the inside because I'm recalling conversations with Mia, and I'm thinking, and I'm like, it was in that window that she would call me sometimes, and it was like, so are you gonna do anything now? When are you gonna start back doing this? And then I was just like, do you remember that? And I was just like, I'm not ready, you know. When she was like, so when are you gonna start working back on a movie or something? And I was just like, you know, I'm just helping my granny and all of these things. And now I'm thinking about those conversations, and I think it was just her sensitivity, which Mia and sensitivity. Now
Watch it.
I'm thinking about the way that she, you know, copes that conversation. And now that I'm listening to y'all, and I'm like, oh, she thought I was depressed.
You were.
And I was, absolutely. I was completely depressed. But I think it's so needed, especially when you surround yourself, not just with friends, but with counselors. Okay, you know, they can easily peep things out. And for a long time, I was kind of in denial. You know, because I remember even with Patricia was like, do you need us to come over? I said, no, I'm good, girl. And then like 6 hours later, I was like, can y'all come? Please just come. Yeah. But it's I'm so grateful for you guys' friendship for that simple matter. But when it comes to, I guess, the spiritual aspect, right? Do we over spiritualize these things to the point that we miss the red flags?
Absolutely.
Because y'all could have just called me speaking in tongues and all of that, but it was like, no, we need to have a session. You know what? Look, it's a whole bunch of stuff popping up, y'all. Now, maybe this was the wrong episode for me to say, but now I'm thinking about our conversations during that time. I'm like, was I there again? I mean, I was just talking to my friend. Y'all was counseling me. That is all of y'all.
Right. You want someone to talk to you with
I had free counseling.
I think it's important. You know, I was just talking to, you know, a friend who's a pastor now, and you know, now that I'm in counseling, and he's a pastor and he does a lot of counseling, and now he's starting to see. You know, he used to spiritualize and pray for these people, but he's like, you know, he asked me because he was doing a session on just self-esteem, and he's like, do you have anything from a clinical standpoint, any resources you can send me?
Right.
And I sent him some resources. He was like, these things here, it's so easy. I was like, why was I suffering all this time? I've been praying for them, doing doing deliverance and fasting. All they needed to do is just understand this. Like, this is basic, you know, things like that. So, you know, he, looking back, not that he's understanding just the mental health, he's a pastor, so he's becoming more aware. It's like a lot of these things we work too hard. And I think in the church, we feel, especially as clergy, we feel like we are responsible for these people. We have to fix them. I'm like, no, that is not our responsibility. Like, Jesus died for them, but he has given tools and these resources to help these people. So I think that's one thing that I find in the church is that we really just work too hard and try to spiritualize these things where there are, tools and people that are trained to help with some of these behaviors that you don't need to take on this.
And I think that because we're trying to take on the same persona as the clergy from the 50s and the 60s, because again, culturally, historically, the preacher, the pastor was your everything. They taught you how to vote. They taught you about the civil issues in your community. I mean, if you were having marital issues, you went to them. If your kid was acting up, you went to them. If you were having personal issues, if you were fornicating, lying, backbiting, all that went to the pastor. And so even though the pastor didn't have a lick of education on that at all back then, all they knew to do was pray. That's it. So that's all they could. That's all they had. That's all they didn't know about. Retraining behaviors and things of that nature. So I think we follow a lot of things based on our culture, and our culture says our pastor is the one end all be all, one-stop shop. You go there for everything. And while I do think that our pastors have a responsibility to lead us in a lot of areas, particularly in the African American community and in the climate that we are in right now, whether it's politically or racially or whatever, we are in a specific climate and a dispensation of time. But there are certain things I just absolutely do not believe that you should be going to your pastor for counseling about, particularly if they do not have the training. And so, the same young lady I mentioned earlier, she attributes all her mental health spiral to her going to her pastor. And she did not, because of course in trauma, you end up having, memory loss and things of that nature. And she started counseling, spiritual counseling with her pastor. And her pastor started triggering memories. And she started remembering all the trauma in her childhood and all the trauma with her parents. And it was a train wreck. And she has not been able to get back on track since then.
So he opened the box.
He opened the box. And then it's almost like that movie. Y'all remember the movie Precious?
Yes.
I like the movie, but I don't like the movie. I like it, but I don't. Because I feel like that movie was very triggering. It was a lot. People were packing out churches and community centers to watch Precious, right? But they could not deal with the Pandora's box that they were opening with people. People were leaving crying and all kinds of stuff. You just opened up this wound for people and you don't know how to salve it.
Because even with surface. They look at surface, but they don't know the cause, the root cause. And I think that's what therapy does. It helps you get to the root cause. Normally pastors just see, you're, fornicating or you're committing adultery. They just see that piece.
Right.
They don't know that maybe you could have been molested. They just don't know all the triggers. And so that's the big problem right now. Going to a pastor or anybody that's not trained, because you open these memories and then what do you do with them? How you gonna try to pack that up? I can't. Now that I remember, what do I do with that? And they don't know. Pray it away. Well, no, you don't pray it out. It's over now.
And even with clinicians, especially when you're dealing with trauma, even as clinicians, you have to have specific training. There are certain level of trauma you need EMDR or biofeedback or different type of specialized therapy to be able to deal with these cases. Now you have a pastor who has no clinical background, and you bring up issues like that are so deep and heavy. You just re-traumatize that person.
Right. You know what? I was sitting here with so much I want to say, but now I'm back on Mia. Right? No, because I agree with everything these ladies are saying, but I think it's about knowing your lane. And I remember when Mia was serving at our old church, and she said this lady had came to the altar and she was spilling out what was wrong, and I'm not gonna tell the lady's testimony. And Mia listened, and then when she got through, she was like, "You need to go see one of these people over here." And I laughed, and I was like, "Girl, why you do that lady like that?" She was like, "I'm not equipped for that." And I think sometimes, you know, you have to admit when you don't have the tools, you know, to help that particular person. It didn't matter that she was a licensed counselor, that she was an elder in the church, and all these things. That ain't my lane.
No one to refer. No one to refer.
Right.
No one to refer. And you know, and since the topic is pill or prayer, you will absolutely know when they come to the altar, and if it's a prayer that's needed or if it's a pill that is. I promise you will know if they missed the dose or if it really it's time to labor at the altar. You will absolutely know.
And they will ask you, because I remember one time I went to the altar and I laid on this lady and I cried literally the entire altar call session. And then, you know, they had dismissed church. You were still there. And that poor lady, she looked at me, she said, "Do you need counseling?" I was like, "I'm already in counseling." You need more help than I can give you.
This was supposed to be. You still here.
Right. The Hispanic people that came in and was cleaning the church.
You still here, bro. This was always like
But it's so true. But you know, the thing is, we don't want to leave people without the tools. And we understand we need to be educated and we need to be aware. So you guys know the signs because you're clinicians. You know, y'all have the degrees, you're educated, right? But to the naked eye, what other signs that we look for that we can say, you know what, I don't have the license, I don't have the master's, the education, the experience, but I know that's one of the signs, and I'm gonna go get some help for you.
I know for me, because I have somewhat of a dual role in what I do, and so it's not always counseling, but a lot of what I do is more on the investigation side and things of that nature. And what I would train my staff to do is when you go into someone's home, if their home is unkept all the time, every time you see them, their home is unkept. Every time you see that person is unkept. Their kids are unkept. There are dishes in the sink, like for no reason, just absolutely no reason. Then you want to start screening for some depression.
Right.
Because there are little bitty things like that, like walking in and finding, you know, bags and bags of trash or food stacked up from days upon days. You have the loss of interest. People who were very interested in one thing and then all of a sudden they lose interest. Or if people start suddenly giving things away, you know, start suddenly saying, you know, this is mine, you know, it has great value, but I want you to have it. You know, things of that nature. If you see a cycle of moods, up and down, 1 minute you sad, the next minute you happy, or the type of mania where they have these grand ideas that you're just kind of like, okay. So, you know, 1 minute we're good, and then tomorrow you see them and they have been up for 12 or 30 hours straight. They've been cleaning the whole time. They have not slept. And then when you talk to them, they say, you know what, I'm going back to school to be an astronaut. And you just like,
Jesus. Yeah.
It's like that episode with Mark when he kept saying, rhythm spoons, you know, and it's like, okay. Rhythm spoons. Okay, this is a great idea. Okay. Because those are things to be concerned about.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that. I mean, basically what she listed a lot of symptoms for depression. You know, the main thing there, you know, especially we look for is that loss of interest, loss of pleasure in things that you used to love doing. You know, those are red flags. You know, so there's also, you know, anxiety. You know, a lot of times people don't really see it as a real disorder, but if your anxiety is getting to a place where you're not able to function, that you're constantly on edge and you're constantly worried about the future, you know, things like that. Again, the baseline. If this is not your baseline, this is not your normal level of functioning, and it's starting to impair your ability to work or parent your children or be around your friends, those, that's a red flag. In that moment, I will either talk to your primary care physician, and if they feel that, there's something definitely there, they'll either assess you there or refer you out to a therapist or a psychiatrist.
And for me, trust your instinct. You know your friends, you know your family. Be observant. Just look for small things. Like if you normally, like I'm looking at you and you see I keep looking. And look at my body language. Body language can tell a lot. If I said I'm happy, but look at my smile. Just ask questions. And that, for me, like I'm always looking at people. Like normally I'll look off, but when I'll hear something or I'll look at you, girl, I'm good, I'm fine. But then I'm looking at your eyes, and your eyes is not saying anything. It's saying something totally different. Or your shoulders are slumped. Normally you're like this, and then today you're like this. Or normally you're kept, right? And then today you just, I don't know. Right. I just don't feel like it. You constantly say, I don't feel like it. Did you go to work today? No, I took off. Just ask certain questions, but your instinct, your friend. Right. If you feel something like, let me call her, do it. Don't ignore it. Like, oh, we talked yesterday, she was fine. No. Listen, just really pay attention to what people say to you and how they say it.
I was listening to Mia a second ago, and I tell people all the time, the way you keep your house determines what's going on inside of you. And that's one telltale for me, for those of y'all that know me, y'all know I'm a clean person, right? And so when you come to my house and things are in disarray, and dishes ain't been washed in weeks, y'all automatically, I remember one time I was talking to Bridget, right? And she FaceTimed me, and my bathroom was very, like every room I went through on FaceTime, she was like, what is going on? You know how people are doing this on the screen, almost like they can look around the corner? And I was like, I know, but it's dirty. I'm going to get on it. It was an everyday thing, like laundry just stacked up and dishes stacked up. And I had to stop and realize, okay, you going through something right now, because this is not even y'all know how I am. I can't even sleep with stuff around me. And so it was like I began to become comfortable with the chaos. And I think that's a real telltale sign, when you see things chaotic around people's lives and they're just functioning.
And I think it's important to have, I think maybe someone out there who knows someone who's there at that place, but you're afraid maybe, I don't want to tell them that they need to see a therapist or professional. A lot of times we're scared, or people, can be offended when you tell them, I think you need to talk to someone, So I think, also just knowing how to extend the help, the right tone, the right timing, don't say something wrong with you, you crazy. Those type of words sometimes can really, cause people to not feel, comfortable with seeking help. Right. So I think that's something else to keep in mind, because I know a lot of people who could have really used the help were afraid of being labeled.
And don't be afraid of letting them be mad at you. Because if you know that something is going on and you're afraid of them getting angry because you took action, I'd rather just be angry than whatever, because it's, you have the on one hand where you can maybe just go over there or call or ask questions and probe and things like that. But if you know that this person has for real started exhibiting some suicidal behaviors and started giving things away and talking like this is it, like there is no future and things of that nature, then go ahead and make the call and have it depends on where you live at, but some areas you can get a mental health warrant, or have the police will come. I don't necessarily like the police addressing mental health right now, because I think they need to be a lot more trained with mental health. But in many areas they send the police to execute a mental health warrant. And because I tell clients all the time, when they want to argue about getting a second opinion and negotiating and things of that nature, there is, especially when it's with their children, because I'm on the CPS side, we don't have time for the negotiation. You either get them to a hospital because they have a clear plan, they have verbalized their clear plan, they have cuts on their arm and everything like that. So you can either A, get them to the hospital and we'll talk about another plan later when they're stable, or B, I will take them. And if I take them, then you'll talk to the judge about it later.
And it's a matter of life and death.
Absolutely. And as professionals, we are mandated reporters. We're mandated to, you know, act when there are concerns of suicidal or homicidal behavior. And as clergy, many times clergy don't realize they are mandated as well.
Right.
So they get people to come in their offices and tell them all this stuff, and they talk about how they're suicidal or homicidal, and then they pray for it and send them out the door.
Right.
No, if they go out that door and kill her, go out that door and kill themselves, you are responsible.
Yeah.
You are mandated. And I don't think a lot of clergy know that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And they will steer you wrong, or like Mia's friend who's still jacked up. You know, God bless her. I hope she ain't watching. I ain't been jacked up. Jesus. I didn't mean that in a derogatory way. But I'm just going back to what you said. I mean, man, let's just move on. I think I killed that right there. I can't even clean that up. I'm sorry, ma'am. What can we do as far as the church and the Black community to normalize mental illness and make it more acceptable?
Educate, have seminars. We educate for everybody, everything else.
That's true.
You know, cancer awareness, just everything. We need mental health awareness.
Educating, normalizing it.
Yeah.
And I think if we can just make it as part of it's a normal, you know, it's part of our culture. The church, the clergy should have a department for counseling, you know, with trained clinicians, and make it part of, you know, that this is part of your normal well-being, you know, just as much as you're taking care of your spiritual well-being and your physical well-being, your mental well-being is important.
Yes.
So normalizing it.
I think I have a whole lot to go with that. So I think that, of course, educating and normalizing it, but I also think that just like we offered, like they had Sunday school and discipleship classes and things of that nature, make mental health, a class on mental health and mental education a part of your discipleship class, so that the awareness and the understanding is there. Now, I was jokingly talking to a friend a couple of days ago, and we were talking about a particular individual who's in ministry, and they tend to have behaviors that are indicative of somebody who is, you know, on one of the axes. You know, whether it's, you know, mood disorder, personality, I tend to think it's a little bit of both. But our running joke is they need to just set up a psychiatrist's office right there in the lobby of the church on Sundays, and you do your med management when you get there, and you check in, and then you go on into your service. You got both right there at the same time. Pill and prayer. See a psychiatrist on Sunday. Because it'll work. I'm telling you, it'll work. You can't say you missed your appointment. You can't say any of that. It's right there in the lobby. The psychiatrist is right there. But I said that because as clergy or as leaders, a lot of the times we think, like your question is pill and prayer, or how do we incorporate it into the church? The mentality becomes, it's for them.
Right.
It's for them. It's not for us. And a lot of the people that I deal with are behind the scenes are the men and women of God.
Yeah.
They need a pill and a prayer. And they're in denial and don't realize that a lot of these abusive behaviors and abusive tactics that they're carrying out in churches, the spiritual abuse that we see, it's because they need a pill. And they don't know how to really navigate through it. A lot of people are on their high horse and are narcissistic and are all these things because they never learn coping skills. So I would advocate for a psychiatrist being built right there in the church. That's just me. I say put both of them.
Are you on pills and prayer?
Hey, if I need one, I won't be ashamed of it.
Yes.
And I think what I see a lot, because y'all know I used to work for the state, right? Y'all know that. And I was an outreach counselor in the field, and what I see a lot is self-diagnosis.
Of course.
We will Google stuff and be like, oh, well, this is what's wrong with me because I see. No, go leave it to the professionals, right? And stop diagnosing everybody else.
Right.
You know, stop using Granny Damn Remedy, you know, or their scale of gauging when something is wrong with somebody. You know, because that's why we're failing in the, you know, the mental department as a culture, as a church, all the way around. That's why we're failing, because like whoever said it earlier, Mia, where you went to the pastor for everything. And you know, we believe Granny and them knew everything because they made it without all this stuff. So, you know, if they did it without all this, then we can too. You know, and it's like that is like like deeply ingrained in us.
Absolutely.
Because we really do feel like maybe we're pacified, you know, as a culture. You know, did they really have mental illness back then? You know, how did they deal with it? They didn't know anything about mental illness, so that it didn't exist. When in reality, it is.
They suffer the same.
Or they put them off in a, you know, because back then they would put you in a hospital.
Right.
Forget about you.
Yeah, right.
They throw you in a hospital and that was it.
Right. Yeah, what, say it again, Patricia? I don't know if y'all
Institutionalized.
heard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they did. You just got locked down somewhere and that was it.
Put them away. That's what they
That
call
was
it
it.
in the black culture. They put you away.
Yeah.
So I want you ladies, you know, to just, for those who are watching, and they may be dealing with family members, friends, loved ones, church members, if they're watching, they're listening, they like, it's them, right? You know? You know what I mean? I really want you guys to give them some encouragement, maybe some resources, websites, whatever it is, that you can give them a word to help them in this journey of becoming more aware, becoming more educated, looking for the signs, all of those things. What advice would you leave for them?
I would say, as advice for me, I would say is patience. Be very, patient. Now, I am not saying be patient and remain in a toxic environment.
Right.
There's a difference between being patient and remaining in a toxic environment.
Right.
So I would say be patient, set boundaries, pray for yourself as well, so that you know how to approach the situation and to know how to handle it. If it's somebody else that you're dealing with that has, mental illness, or you believe is a diagnosed mental illness, and you're trying to talk to them about maybe getting some help,
Right.
you really need the patience and the understanding of what you're dealing with at that moment. And if you are a person who struggles with some type of mental illness, whether it is something like depression or anxiety or hallucinations, or whether that's visual or auditory hallucinations, whatever that is, then I would absolutely encourage you to not be afraid to seek help. Prayer is excellent, and I would never deter anyone from prayer. And so I would say definitely continue to pray and, go. If you got to be that one that's at the altar every single Sunday,
Right.
be that one at the altar every single Sunday. But on Monday morning, make sure you're down there at whatever local MHMR mental health facility, setting your appointment so that we can get some balance and some stability, because faith without works is dead.
And I just echo that, be honest with yourself. You know yourself, and you know if it's something that has changed. Reach out for help. Please reach out for help and pray. I always pray, and if you're a praying person, ask God to send the right people into your life. Say, God, I need help. I don't know where to go, and trust me, He will send you the right people. It could be via commercial. It can be a song come on. It can be anything, but just trust God and trust the process. Get help. If it's just talking to someone. I know we're talking about medication. You might not need medication. You might just need someone to give you a strategy on how to unwrap your emotional issues right now. It doesn't mean that something's serious. Get it while it's early. You don't even have to wait. If you're feeling, I've been sad too long, or it's been a week and I don't feel like getting out of the bed. It's okay, be real and just say, you know what, I'm going to talk to somebody just to get a self-checkup. A mental self-checkup is okay. It is okay. You don't have to wait till your physical. Everyone gets their physical exam once a year, but we need to be more proactive with our mental health, our emotional health. Things are going on in this world, especially now. Now is the time. It's a lot going on. People are in the houses by themselves. They don't have anyone to talk to. Counselors are the perfect people. You can trust them. It's confidential. You don't have to worry about them judging you. Sometimes you just want to talk to someone, and it's okay. So my thing is, reach out. Be honest with yourself. You know you're normal, and if you don't think you're normal or people are complaining, get some help. And it's okay. If you need to go to a pastor, say, hey, can you refer me to someone? They might have the tools. Churches have. They might not have a psychiatrist on hand or a counselor, but they might know someone. Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of what the ladies have said, and I would just add, one of my favorite quotes I like to tell to say is it all begins in the mind. So your mental well-being, your mind is such an important part of your entire health. So if your mind is not doing well, believe me, it will impact every other areas of your life, physically, socially, financially. So you deserve to make yourself a priority. You have to make yourself a priority. So a lot of the times we are quick to take care of everything else when it comes to ourselves and prioritizing ourselves. We always find excuses. So I would just encourage you to make yourself a priority and know that you deserve to live life to the fullest. You deserve to have joy. You deserve to have peace. So talk to someone, reach out for help. I know we talked about mental health. To some extent, is still a privilege. Not everybody can afford it. So know that there are resources out there, there are services out there that provide therapy at a very affordable price, or a psychiatrist, at an affordable price. You mentioned MHMR is one of them. There is NAMI, who has resources based on the area where you are located. NAMI. Okay. So you can just go to NAMI.com, and if you're looking for a therapist or a psychiatrist, you can type your zip code, and they can direct you to places that have affordable mental health providers and services. So there are options out there. Don't feel limited or helpless. Just reach out for help. Okay.
And don't be getting on NAMI right when they next to you. Wait at least till they leave them. Wait at least till they go. Patricia Batoba, Mia Johnson, and Lakeisha Castleberry, thank y'all so much for joining me on this conversation. You guys have educated me. I've gotten supporters. I realized. You know what? I realize now that they all were counseling me at some point. I was in therapy. I know it, but I thank y'all for the free counseling. Don't bill me. But I appreciate you guys having this conversation and not just the encouragement, but the education and awareness that we all have now. So when you have education and you have awareness, it makes you accountable. So be responsible with this information. Now, we're not saying go around and just be looking at people eyeballing them. I think that's one of the. I think you got one of the signs. Now, don't you turn crazy. Now, we gonna find you an MHMR. But I'm just saying, I love these types of dialogues because they are needed. Don't over spiritualize everything. Some things are practical, and even though the Lord may heal you and deliver you and set you free, glory. Go get you some for real help after that. And not saying that, we know the for real help is through Christ Jesus, but I'm saying get up and go get you some natural help to help you along the way so you continue on your journey. Thank you all again, ladies, for joining me. Listen, this has been another episode of What's the Issue Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we're right back here with another episode, another fresh topic, and some amazing guests. Tomorrow is Thursday, so we're walking the word. It's Bible study. Come join me, get some fresh revelation from on high, and we are going to feast and eat together. Thank you guys for supporting ZMR Ministries and for joining us again on tonight. You guys have a blessed night. We'll see you later.
Bye.
No longer living yesterday. It won't hurt anymore. Forgetting all my past mistakes. And today I'm starting over. My past is now behind me. Every tear I